Dylan Ratigan, we have our favorite financial expert, best-selling New York Times author, former host of his own show on MSNBC, award-winning Bloomberg journalist, and he's now on the weekly podcast for Tasty Trade called Truth or Skepticism with Tom Sosnoff. It's Dylan Ratigan. Hi, Dylan. How are you?
I'm very good. Have you ever thought about a theme music of some kind, like sort of a Tonight Show thing, like something, because you got that sort of retro-y logo, and you kind of have that sort of Southern California joie de vivre. Like, I feel like you could get away with a nice intro music, like a, here's Jimmy. Steph, you could do like a here's Jimmy thing. Maybe
yeah,
not.
You know what? I've been, I tried to commission someone to write me we actually have one for our podcast, our audio podcast. There's kind of a for lack of a better term, a groovy tune somebody made for us. And we put it on, and we put it on there. Maybe we should bring it over to the. Maybe we should bring it over to the YouTube show. You're right. That's a good idea.
I mean, otherwise, how do I know it's a show?
That's right.
You got this big, moon, and it's called the Jimmy Dore Show. Looks pretty glamorous. Looks pretty exciting.
So our friend Mike Timpson put together a couple of graphics for this segment, the Corona Money. He put a funny one together for you. But we ended up not using it because you said you didn't want to go with that Madigan with Ratigan. But it was funny. I'll send you it was a little video he put together. It was really funny, actually.
Really?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Like you might be. I feel like a less honorable soul might be able to exploit my refusal to go in front of cameras to put all sorts of images up in my stead.
Yeah. Yes. I'm with you.
You could abuse the situation.
But I like the idea of some theme music. I get it. Hey, did you hear Joe Rogan is going to Spotify?
Pretty big, pretty exciting. I mean, listen, he's established obviously an incredible platform and an incredible audience. So, but I think what's good for Joe Rogan is good for Jimmy Dore. Last I checked, in the sense that as the market matures, I think it's good for everybody, especially people that are in the situation you're in.
Yeah, so he was getting somewhere like a couple 100 million downloads between YouTube and iTunes and whatever a month. That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's bigger than Johnny Carson, I'll tell you that much.
Oh yeah, it's way bigger. He just mentions my name and I get 5,000 subscribers.
I mean, he might be bigger than the Beatles.
Yeah. Yes. Oh yeah. He's up there. He's getting up there. He eventually may be. When I started in comedy back in the 40s, if you got on the Tonight Show and you were playing a club that week, they gave you an extra $5,000. So
you're saying you're playing a club in Hollywood?
Yeah, let's say
you get a gig you get a set on the Tonight Show, and that's worth $5 extra.
Yes. So let's say I'm playing the Comedy Cafe in Milwaukee. And and on that Wednesday, I'm on the Tonight Show. They would give me $5,000 extra when I went to their club.
Oh, I see. You're saying you're booking there. Is that for every booking thereafter, or just the first booking thereafter?
Just the first one, the one they mention on the show. So if Johnny Carson said you can see him this week at Giggles in Cincinnati, they would say, or at the Go Bananas in Cincinnati, you could see him this week, and then they would give you $5,000. That ended.
So the club that gets the plug pays the fee.
That's right. Yeah, they stopped doing that. So that's how, network television lost its luster. It didn't have any more punch. And so now it went to places.
It's all Skype now.
It's all joke. Yes. Well, the ultimate irony is our good friend Cenk Uygur spent, $20 million getting his TV studio up to TV studio broadcast quality standards, and now nobody's fucking.
And now everybody's on Skype.
Everybody's at their house. I mean, I'm laughing because it's just I'm not enjoying his. But that's a tough break. And it's going to be like this for 2 goddamn years. People are going to be doing. It's kind of funny. So let's get into it. The chairman of the Fed is a guy named Powell, right? He's the new one. And here's
Chairman Powell to you.
Chairman Powell to me. Yes.
And to me and to all of us.
Yes.
But sure.
And he embraces his gray, right? Which gives you a lot more confidence in what he has to say. I'm embracing my gray. So here's what he had to say. I hope you can hear it, and then we'll talk about it. He had some big stuff to say.
Powell's Federal Reserve can only lend money that must be paid back. Congress, he believes, should spend money.
Oh, hang on. I got the wrong. Hang on. This is the wrong clip. Hold on.
That sounds like a voiceover.
No, that was Scott Pelley. So here.
That sounds like an authoritative CBS journalist saying important things.
That is strong-jawed Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes. He went to the strong jaw school with Lawrence O'Donnell. Hang on.
Yeah.
Here we go.
The Fed is the source of all U.S. currency, and it regulates the economy by setting interest rates. In the Depression, it was given vast power to lend money in an emergency. It used that authority for the first time in the 2008 collapse, and for the second time 9 weeks ago. Has the Fed done all it can do?
Well, there's a lot more we can do. We're not out of ammunition by a long shot. No, there's really no limit to what we can do with these lending programs that we have.
So that was big news, apparently, right, Dylan? That was very big news.
Well, I mean, it yes and no. I think that what was most interesting about Chairman Powell's comments was there are a lot of folks in both the media world and in the investment community. So if you look at the Tasty trade side of my life and the investment side of my life, and then the media and politics side of my life with you, there's a sense of that there's this obfuscation, or there's this sort of secrecy about what the Fed does and doesn't do, and how can they just make infinite money. And so I think it's a little bit disarming for people just to hear the chairman say, yeah, no, we can. There is no limit to the amount of money we can create, and to say it in a very matter-of-factly.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously something that I've been saying for a long time, and it's something that a lot of people have been observing with great outrage. It's a mathematical fact, that the Fed can produce as much currency as it wants into the tens of trillions, as we witnessed.
And so I just want.
I mean, the real headline from that Powell interview, however, in my opinion, was not simply the validation of the fact that sure the Fed can create as much money as they want, but that Chairman Powell really came out and said that they can only, even if they lend an infinite amount of money, they're not providing cash to people that are by law being forced to stay home, for people who by law have been forced to close the most vulnerable small businesses in the country in every state in America, and they're not being given access to health care. And Chairman Powell was very blunt about the fact that he believes the Congress should be doing more direct assistance for human beings, because the Federal Reserve is not capable of doing that thing. And this is not a financial crisis. This is a biological crisis, and this is a economic crisis for people, and that is not the Fed's specialty. That is
Congress.
The healthcare system's specialty, we would hope, even though we pay twice as much, and I won't get into we all know the horrors there. And then it's an economic issue, and so whether it's on the healthcare or on the economic side, Congress has failed catastrophically in a way that will permanently change this country forever for the worse, as we've described.
I know. And people
and it's weird to hear. So the Fed chairman's just saying it is, it's disappointing, really, because you realize that even when it's said by the most influential people in our society, it's still completely ignored by the Pelosi-Trump axis of evil.
So let me go. So let me go. I wasn't going to play, but let me play what he said. You just described what he said. I'll play it, and then we'll come back again.
March, as the Dow collapsed 8,000 points and credit markets began to freeze, Powell called an emergency meeting on a Sunday. He cut interest rates to near zero, and in partnership with the Treasury, the Federal Reserve offered more than $3 trillion in lending to banks, businesses, cities, and states. With that assurance, the credit markets, essential to daily business, began to function again. Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money?
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally. So we as a central bank, we have the ability to create money digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills or bonds or other government guaranteed securities, and that actually increases the money supply. We also print actual currency, and we distribute that through the Federal Reserve banks.
But by law, Chairman Powell's Federal Reserve can only lend money that must be paid back. Congress, he believes, should spend money to expand its historic bailout. After all, he says, this emergency is nothing like 2008.
This is not because there was some inherent problem, a housing bubble or something like that, or the financial system in trouble. Nothing like that. The economy was fine. The financial system was fine. We're doing this to protect ourselves from the virus. And that means that when the virus outbreak is behind us, the economy should be able to recover substantially.
And what sort of support, in your view, do you think the Congress...
Let me just stop it there. Do you think, Dylan, that the economy will recover substantially after this coronavirus outbreak is over?
Obviously not, but that's a function of their explicit policies have been written by the Pelosi-Trump axis of evil to ensure that maximum economic damage is done.
Yes, that's what I thought.
It's been a policy decision.
Yes, to do this. So is he just being like like a cheerleader for the economy when he says that, or does he really think that he knows what's coming, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think he's saying that the economy will recover. He was saying the economy should recover. There's no reason an appropriate policy response to a biological crisis. There's no reason for the response to the biological crisis to create a permanent economic catastrophe.
Right.
The decision to turn the biological crisis into a extended or permanent economic catastrophe is a policy decision made by the Trump Pelosi axis of evil. Right.
Okay. And so now here he gets to the part where he says, here's now one of the most informed guys around, powerful guys around. Here's what he says Congress should be doing. Turns out it's the same thing that me and you have been saying they should be doing. Here we go.
Want to consider.
I don't give them advice on particular policies, but I would say, if I may, that policies that help businesses avoid avoidable insolvencies and that do the same for individuals. Keep workers in their homes, keep them paying their bills, keep families solvent.
Among the options.
So there is a guy saying, hey, make sure everybody has money to pay their bills and make sure all the companies have enough money until this is over so we can start our economy again. They're not doing that at all, right? Dylan, in fact...
No, they've used this as an opportunity to destroy business and consolidate wealth. I mean, they did the opposite. They exploited it for destruction and consolidation.
So now why isn't
it... the opposite? My point is it's not just that they failed to support people and businesses. They exploited the biological crisis as an opportunity to destroy and consolidate.
Yes. So now, why isn't guys like him, like Chairman Powell of the Fed, who he knows what needs to be done in Congress, so why aren't there guys like him or big bankers or people who could have a platform and have gravitas? Why aren't they saying things in a more forceful way?
I mean, he did just go on 60 Minutes, one, so you have to give him credit for that. Two, he is not a politician and he doesn't represent the people. He represents the interest of stabilizing the financial system, which he has done to the great benefit of the super wealthy, and in a way that has avoided further economic pain from adding a financial. So remember, you have 4 potential crises, 3 underway, right?
Right.
Biological crisis, we know. Economic crisis, we know. Social crisis percolating. Financial crisis avoided. Right? Those are the 4 categories of crises that have been brought to either existence or potentiality. And the only crisis that he is in a position to mitigate is the financial crisis. But the issue is entirely resides with the policy decisions made by the Pelosi-Trump apparatus.
Got it. And
the Pelosi-Trump apparatus has made conscious decisions to explicitly seek to destroy business, particularly targeting small business and the most vulnerable, while raiding assets as quickly as possible for the super wealthy. I mean, it is literally. I don't know. I can't think of a bad enough metaphor. I would come up with 10 of them, but none of them would be effective enough. I mean, your neighbor's house is on fire. You run inside and steal everything, and I mean that doesn't cut it, right? I mean, they took a biological crisis as an opportunity to raid the country on behalf of the wealthiest in this country as a decision, not as an accident, and not as a result of anybody doing anything wrong. It's nobody's fault in this country that this virus came to exist, but it is the fault of the government that when the virus came to exist, they used its existence as an opportunity to destroy and consolidate.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So why? Well, I guess I understand. I guess I already understand.
Why?
I was going to ask you a question about. So why is it just people still the people in progressive media? I don't think still have understood that. No, in fact, I know for a fact they don't know what's coming or what has been done, and they're still treating like that first stimulus, the CARES Act. They're still treating that as somehow just like another bad vote, instead of the kind of thing that should tarnish your political career forever. They don't
mark a historic intersection in the history of America.
Yes,
that may permanently end any semblance of a middle class or even democracy.
And so, what do you say to the people? You hear a lot of knuckleheads out there who don't really understand how things work and are just kind of feckless lefties who say things like, well, what was a Bernie supposed to do? Can you tell them what Bernie, because I've told them. Now, can you tell them what Bernie was supposed to do? Remember, you said
stop the vote.
He was supposed to what?
Hold the vote. You can put a hold on a vote. A senator can put a hold on a vote.
Uh-huh.
And then if you're as good a speaker as Bernie Sanders is, and you're as smart as Bernie Sanders is, you hold the vote and you go to the floor and you give the biggest barn burner of a speech that you've ever given in your life. It goes viral, and you consolidate support for. So here's what you have to understand: like, just as it's obvious to Chairman Powell, just as it was obvious to Justin Trudeau, just as it's obvious to the Prime Minister of Germany, go down the list of all these countries. As sure as if you walk into a house and your light bulbs are out and it's the middle of the night and you want to read a book, well, then you have to turn the lights on or replace the light bulb. It's not a political decision. You would like to have light to read. When the biological crisis happened, we turned the lights out on the economy. The only response to that is immediate short-term UBI and immediate access to health care. This is not a political decision. This is, your car has run out of gas. You want to keep your car moving. There is no shortage of resources, as Powell has pointed out and everybody else has reinforced. You simply put the gas in the car because it's much cheaper to put the gas in the car or to replace or to turn on the lights than it is to leave it rotting on the side of the road, such that when you finally try to restart the car or to leave the house overrun with mold and decay, it's much cheaper to simply put the fuel in the car or put the lights on the house than it is to have to repair the rotted, non-functioning car after you've left it for months, or the destroyed house. You understand?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think where we get lost is we're like, oh, well, Jimmy Dore this and Jimmy Dore that, or they pick on the identity of the conversation as if it's an expression of an opinion. And there are lots of things that we all have opinions on. It is not a matter of opinion that the appropriate thing when you shut down an economy for a biological crisis is to then put that economy on life support in a way that's much cheaper by putting in the UBI and the access to healthcare. Like it's just, there's a reason every other country in the world did it, and it's not because they're liberal or conservative. It's because they're not vicious, murderous beasts. I don't know. I don't mean I don't know how. I don't even know what to say, Jimmy. I mean,
I'm beside myself too, and I watch other lefty news shows, and they really have a very unsophisticated view of what's happening right now. They don't really understand what's coming, and then their natural reflex is to protect politicians, which is such a childish thing. What do you say about? I mean, do you notice that? Do you notice people still? I don't know how close you monitor the news these days, but or the the personalities, but do you find it strange? I knew that the corporate news wouldn't give the correct breakdown of what's happening, which is why we do a show. But I'm still surprised to find people defending politicians like a fan club instead of understanding the situation. So Bernie should have definitely put a hold on that bill. Just to go over one more time, it's not a Rubik's Cube. Bernie, as you said on the show before, what's the point of having the power to shut down a bill and put a hold on it if you don't use it, right?
If you're going to use it once in your life, after what we learned in 2008, and when the obvious answer is UBI and healthcare first, not last, first. Like the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that there's UBI and healthcare, and then in parallel, you have to immediately flood the system with money in order to prevent a financial crisis. So you don't have another compounding crisis.
Right.
So Powell, excuse me, did what he had to do, because it's again, it's not. It's like, how like if you're in an airplane and like if these fighter jets and then it's going to blow up and you push a button to eject because the plane's going to explode.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a political decision,
right? Yeah, I know, I got it.
And so you think Powell wants to deal with all the controversy of throwing trillions around to keep the system liquid? Surely he does not, right?
Right.
But in the situation, he threw the switch.
Right.
You think the politicians want to deal with throwing money at UBI and healthcare and all this, whether it's in Germany or Canada or Australia or go down the list? Of course not. It's what you have to do. If you break your arm, do you want to get a cast and reset your arm? No. But am I going to make you just run around with a broken arm and never take you to the doctor? I mean, it's preposterous.
But we should definitely give our politicians a pass for that CARES Act, right? we should definitely. I mean, what were they supposed to do? I mean, Mitch McConnell's the most powerful guy in the world. What are they supposed to do? They're not going to do.
Our politicians have chosen a policy path of destruction and consolidation. It's a decision.
And not only did no one, Sherrod Brown, Elizabeth Warren. Not only did no one stop that bill, they voted for it. So they voted for
That's right.
They not only did they not stop it, try to get a coalition of politicians to stop it, try to make the people in America aware of what was actually happening. They didn't do that either. They did nothing. They did absolutely nothing.
No, they provided they did.
And then
they did nothing. They proactively provided coverage for it by voting for it.
Even that's what I was just about to say. Even worse than doing nothing, they actually went over the line and were actually our enemies, because they then provided cover for this horrible bill, exactly like you said, so that Donald Trump can go, hey, it passed 96-0. What do you mean? Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown, they all voted for it. What are you talking about? So that's when they actually went from just being regular cowards to actually being nefarious, evil actors. Is that too much hyperbole?
No, I don't think so. I mean, evil is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, if you're a beneficiary of destruction and consolidation, you might think that's a good thing. But I think you just have to understand that the destruction and consolidation decision which is uniquely American in the world, is a concrete, deliberative, considered,
Yes.
and decisive policy decision made by the U.S. government.
Yeah. It's worse than So it's worse than a cowardly act. This is an overt, rapacious screwing and destruction of American culture, society, economy on purpose. And then they get guys like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Sherrod Brown to then give cover for it by voting for it without putting a hold on it, stopping it. It is so. And anybody who doesn't share our outrage is either doesn't understand what exactly is going on. I'll just put it that way. They don't understand what's going on, and so you almost can't be angry at them because they just have they watch MSNBC and CNN, and that's what they think is happening, and they don't know any better. It's amazing. So that was,
and even the people that work there. Going back to your earlier question, I mean, my experience working inside of both the financial media and the political media for, I guess, 20 years, give or take, there is a remarkably unsophisticated or openly ignorant understanding of any of the things that we are talking about at a level that is profoundly disturbing, which is largely a function of the fact that most of the people that are in the business are in the business because they thought it would be fun to be on television, and they were good at the horse race, whether it's the horse race of which stock is up or down or which CEO is up or down in the financial world, or which politician is up or down in the political world, or which identity group or sort of offensive coalition is doing something horrible. And so there's a whole generation of journalists who are extremely skilled at, prosecuting why Republicans are terrible or defending the righteousness of some constituency or another in terms of that type of advocacy, or celebrating the CEO or of whatever company, or vilifying the CEO of whatever company. But it's really all soap opera.
Mm-hmm.
None of it is. It's all just emotional hyperbole. With Jeff Bezos is the greatest CEO that ever lived, or Mark Zuckerberg's the most evil CEO that ever lived, or Bernie Sanders is the greatest leader of our generation, or Donald Trump is the worst, or Bernie Sanders is the worst and Donald Trump is the best, or whatever it is. All that is really just soap opera. And so you have a population of producers, writers, and broadcasters who do not comprehend in any way, shape, or form the economy. And almost none of them, if not none of them, have ever had to depend on the operation of a small business,
right,
or of even a medium-sized business for their security. They don't understand, because they've always had corporate health care that's very good. They don't understand the actual cost of health care because it's invisible to them, because it's embedded in their comp packages. And they don't understand the consequences of forcing. I mean, imagine if one of the consequences of the coronavirus was if you watched television news, your eyes would fall out. So now it's illegal for them to have customers. I bet it's
right.
There's a complete and total absence of comprehension of what's happening. And when people don't comprehend something, their first instinct is to dismiss it as those who are trying to bring it up, it doesn't matter who's trying to bring it up, as either marginal crackpots, or whatever the mechanism of dismissiveness is, because their primary interest, although I think frequently not conscious, is simply self-preservation of their own identity and relevance as powerful actors in society, which is really where their social identity lives, at all costs. Whether it's a politician or a prominent journalist, it's kind of all the same sickness.
Yeah. Okay. That's great analysis. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. So let's move on to exactly what Chairman Powell was talking about. So what he was talking about is that the Congress, and exactly what we've been talking about since this crisis first started in early March, is that you need to have a UBI and you need to give people money. You need to make businesses stable and you need to give people health care. Well, guess what they're doing in Germany? This is how Germany is saving jobs during the pandemic. Turns out they're not having an unemployment spike like we are having in the United States, and let's find out why. Unemployment in the United States is now almost 15%. It's probably much higher than that. The highest since the end of the Great Depression. But in Western Europe, things have worked out very differently during this pandemic. What? You mean they have better politicians than we do? Please don't criticize our politicians. That hurts my feelings. I have daddy issues. Tens of millions of people stopped working, but they didn't lose their jobs, huh? Across the continent, employees have taken advantage of various short-term leave schemes in which the government pays their salaries until activity can resume. In most countries, the programs already existed. That's how forward-thinking these people are. Before the arrival of COVID-19, in place to allow employers to temporarily reduce output in a downturn without firing workers. But they have been radically expanded to deal with the virus. For in France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom, it was estimated recently that over 20% of the workforce was on one of these plans. Governments are spending a lot of their own money in order to keep unemployment down, make sure that paychecks continue to arrive, even if workers often don't get the 100% of their normal wages, and they ensure that companies can just pick up where they left off as stay-at-home measures end. The difference in numbers is striking. I mean, unemployment numbers between the United States and everyone else in the world. The IMF expects German unemployment for 2020 to hit around 4%. And the more volatile in the UK, the Bank of England recently warned that unemployment may double to 9%. These schemes have done a lot to keep unemployment down, says Jessica Hinz, an economist at Capital Economics in London. And since the workers are getting paid, that means that consumer spending should recover more quickly. But there are also other benefits for the companies, not just the workers. Since they retain the same staff with the same skill set, workers don't have to deal with uncertainty, and the larger economy doesn't have to incur all the efficiency losses that could be associated with a lot of firing and rehiring. The most famous and longest running of all these European programs is the German Kurzarbeit. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Kurzarbeit. It's a short work scheme. It dates back to the early 20th century, and it is credited with being one of the reasons Germany recovered so quickly from the 2008-2009 recession. Employers can respond to short-term reductions in demand by simply notifying the government, which gives firms the money they need to pay most of the difference. Since the financial crisis, many other large European countries have copied the program or expanded their own versions. They were designed for normal economic downturns, but they have been perfectly suited to the pandemic.
Move your chair up.
So, move my chair up now? Okay, so how are we doing now? Good? So, Dylan, it seems like there's a template for how to deal with this. Germany has 4% unemployment. We have currently 15 and climbing. So why does the United States not learn from this?
Because the United States culturally and politically has no interest in learning from this. Unlike those countries, the United States, led by Pelosi and Trump, saw this as an opportunity to exploit, destroy, and consolidate. So surely they considered what most of the world did in this situation. And instead of doing it, they used it as an opportunity to perpetrate a multi-trillion-dollar economic attack on a targeted population in this country to try to destroy them forever while consolidating wealth. It was a policy decision. We just talked about this.
Yeah.
In other words, when I came back, I remember I landed from Europe literally the day Trump gave that speech, and we were talking all in those days, and we were going on, and it was a whole thing. And immediately we were like, and I said, and you said, what do we? Reflexively, UBI and healthcare right now, today, tonight.
On options.
You got to flood them. I mean, and it's not because I'm some sort of a super genius. Okay, like this is a template for like when you have a financial crisis, to Chairman Powell's point, that is a totally different animal. And just because you may have some of similar symptoms with job losses and disruption, the symptoms are not the point. The cause is the entire thing. And if you don't understand the cause, you can't solve the problem. And because there is a template for it, and because I am a human being with open eyes and ears who sees things, when this happened, it was obvious, because it's obvious if your car is out of gas that you want to put gas in the car. So the person who suggests you put gas in the car is not a genius. They're just somebody who knows that there's a gas tank in the car that's empty that needs to be filled. And that's what every other country in the world has done, because it's much cheaper, by the way. You spend far less money. I mean, there's much less loss of life. It's vastly less expensive in the short term. It is profoundly less expensive in the long term. It doesn't create a massive political consolidation to the super wealthy. It doesn't destroy the middle class. It doesn't. But you have to want to do it. And because none of the American politicians wanted to provide that support in any way, shape, or form, and because American politicians explicitly saw this as an opportunity to destroy and consolidate, they took it. I mean, they saw the car was out of gas, and they ran up on the car, ripped the tires off, ripped out the interior, grabbed the radio, and lit it on fire.
I know.
It was out of gas.
And then
they're gonna be like, man, it's going to cost a lot of money to put this car back together. And
they voted for it.
You could have just put gas in the tank.
Could have just done that. Instead, they wrecked the country on purpose, and then they got every progressive to go along with it. Everyone
and then they spend all their time blaming the other side for who wrecked the country.
Yes.
Oh, it's Donald Trump's fault. Oh,
it's the Republicans.
So now it's everybody's.
Yeah. Oh, it's Donald Trump's the most dangerous president in the history of blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is screwing the country for decades, along with Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell.
But it goes both ways, right? Because then the Republicans are like, oh, it's Pelosi,
That's
Pelosi.
Right.
Like it works. The knife cuts both ways. But the reality is that's why half the people in this country don't vote.
That is exactly why 100 million people
that are not stupid.
That's exactly right. And so now the Republicans are making fun of this latest stimulus, the HEROES Act, because of all the identity politics stuff they put in it. And so now they get red meat to give to their base. And it's exactly what you said. So this two-party system, which really is professional wrestling, because they all work for the same guy, and the conclusion is already set. Just like professional wrestling, they know who's going to win before it starts. Same thing with politics, right? Nancy Pelosi rips up Donald Trump's speech as she's passing his legislative agenda. I get emails from Bernie Sanders telling me all the great shit he got in that bill, even though I know it screwed me hard. And he gave cover to those people. And it goes for there's nobody who's without. I hold Bernie to a higher standard because he actually has a big movement behind him. And he said he wanted to be organizer in chief. And he's the one who suppressed the start of a third party for the last 4 years. And he did it on purpose. And then he sheepdog a bunch of progressives into this corporate party that's screwing them. Even right now, I mean, again, this moment perfectly made for people like Bernie Sanders can't meet the moment. Can't do it because he doesn't want to be Ralph Nader. It is the most pathetic end to a political career that I could ever imagine. And people are going to find out what they did and what they didn't do. People are going to find out the results of this pretty soon. I know because I know you, so I know what's actually coming. But other people don't. And still in the progressive news sphere, they don't have any idea. Because if they did, like you said earlier, a couple weeks ago, they would be screaming like us. The fact that they aren't tells us that they don't really know what's coming, but they will. And I'm used to sticking my chin out at this show and getting it right. So we'll do it again. So when do you think, Dylan, the rest of the country will catch on to what actually happened? Do you think the news media will ever report it? And do you think the country will ever catch on?
I think it's unlikely, honestly. I think it's unlikely that most of the country will ever understand. And I think it's highly unlikely. There'll probably be some interesting documentary films made.
Right.
Remember, after the financial crisis, there were a couple of good documentaries that they did. That
The Big Short
really did a good job. I mean, yeah, even The Big Short kind of was more really missed. I mean, it was a great movie, but it didn't really. It was caught up in the mechanics.
Okay.
I forget who's the guy, Charles something or other. I forget his name. Who did another doc on it? Anyway, my point is, I don't believe anybody. I believe the majority of the country will never understand, because the majority of the country will either believe it was the Republicans' fault or they'll believe it was the Democrats' fault. And the entire apparatus is invested in ensuring that somebody's blamed. So whether it's the unemployment, whether it's the homelessness, whether it's the lack of health care, whatever the symptom as this sort of slow rolling crisis plays out over the next few years, that symptoms will entirely be exploited and leveraged and blamed on the other side, so to speak, and the media will play along. So I suspect it will likely, maybe in 50 years, somebody will be like, man, that was a great country until all that stuff happened. And why did that? I mean, it's the same way I think about World War. Think about the people don't. Even to this day, how many people really understand the economic dynamics in Germany in the 1930s, where the entire thing was whose fault are the economic problems in Germany?
That's right.
Right, and the city people versus the farmer people, and then ultimately Jews were identified as the problem,
culprit,
right, as to the reason why, and we all know the story there. But was it the Jews' fault that there was economic problems in Germany? Obviously not, right? And so was it any one population's fault that there were those issues in Germany? Obviously not. Were a bunch of decisions made by all of the countries after World War I regarding economic penalties for Germany after that war that ensured Germany's impoverishment, not to mention depression and there's all these macro factors. And so, I think that there's so much intelligence, so many resources, and so much money and time, time, and talent, both on the media apparatus side and on the political apparatus side, to focus on who is to blame within the sort of identity pools, the Republicans, the Democrats, the men, the women, the old, the young, split and slice them and dice them however you want. And there's such ease and fluidity in the currency of that blame, and there's so much, again, money and talent invested in ensuring that if it's Nancy Pelosi's fault, or if it's Donald Trump's fault, or if it's the Republican, I can sleep with that. I can understand that. I can organize around that. I can vote against that.
Right.
If the entire government was faced with the most obvious response, which is simply UBI and healthcare, and just make policies. I mean, it's not just Germany. I think I said this to you. Watching all these policies roll out, I think it was in the Netherlands. They were immediately said, listen, we're going to shut everything down. We're going to do all these things we got to do. But everybody needs to understand, it's a policy that any business or person, whatever economic condition a person or business was in before this virus arrived, it is the obligation of the government and the banking system to ensure that every single one of those businesses and one of those individuals is in the same economic condition when this is over. That's not a moral position. That is the cheapest and most efficient economic. Like, if you want to be a ruthless economic planner, the cheapest and most efficient way out of the system, or out of the situation, with the crisis, is that. But if you're looking to create for an opportunity to raid and rob a country, there is no greater opportunity to raid and rob a country than a situation like this, which is what the American politicians did collectively.
Yeah, I know it's so yeah, so people will.
But then what are you going to do with that, right? Once you get to the cognitive dissonance of sort of, let's say you accept the Jimmy and Dylan story or reporting, and it's more than a story, it's facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once I allow myself to internalize those facts, one, I'm forced to reevaluate my relationship with whoever my guy or gal is, if I'm whatever side you all have. I love Nancy Pelosi, I love Bernie Sanders, I love Donald Trump, whoever you love, right? It forces you to fall out of love or feel the betrayal that is hard to deal with, and I understand of that. And then once you come on the other side of the betrayal, there's an incredible sense of disempowerment, because now what are you left with? What can you do? You thought your vote mattered. You thought voting was important, all these things. And now you're really left with nothing. And so there's a strong psychological incentive not to hear what we're saying.
Yes.
Which is understandable.
It's a hard to grasp betrayal of the American people by its government. Like, I grew up as a Democrat, so I always thought that it was just half the government that was evil. But of course, now I'm a little bit more of a grown-up, and I understand that it's actually one-party rule, and it's a professional wrestling, and they all work. And so when you see, so it is
which is why, again, ranked choice voting, just something as simple as ranked choice voting, which is catastrophic for both parties.
Yes, catastrophic.
It doesn't have to be armed insurrection, right? Literally, something as simple as ranked choice voting is profound. It's like dissolves the ground underneath them without ever lifting a glove.
Wow. So, do you know anything about? Okay, so let's move on. Let me ask you a question about. Do you know anything about the donut theory and the for-profit system, i.e., the donut theory in the Netherlands? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't. What tell me.
I don't know anything about it either.
Well, what's the donut theory? I've never even heard of it.
I don't even fucking know.
Then why are you bringing it up? You must have heard something. Does it involve donuts or is it a metaphor? I mean, what's the story? I thought they do French fries and
hang on,
waffles in the Netherlands.
Someone sent me an email about it. I read it, and now I've forgotten what it was.
All right.
And I'm looking let me look for the email. Hang on. Okay, that's not it. I'm looking for the email. I don't know where it is. God damn it. All right.
Well, do you have any idea what the premise, what the relevance?
No, I don't. I can't find the goddamn email. Fucker. So
you just have a craving for donuts? Do you ever go to some good donut shops out in California?
So there's I love donuts, but
yeah.
And you know what I was just thinking, someone was saying to me the other day, I think that muffins are why not just have a donut? Muffins have this idea that they're somehow good for you because they don't taste as good as a donut, but they're actually just as bad for you as a donut. So why not just have a donut?
So once you've left the reservation, have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, come on, a muffin, just because it doesn't taste as good as a donut doesn't mean it's better for you.
I mean, if you're gonna have a muffin, you might as well just eat some tofu.
I don't. I'm not a tofu guy either. Anyway,
all right.
So let's get to this Washington Post article. It says triple whammy of good news catapults the Dow more than 900 points. Triple whammy. It says right here, it says a triple whammy of good news led by promising results from a coronavirus vaccine trial buoyed investors Monday, powering Wall Street to strong across-the-board gains. For one, this is the first triple whammy. This is the first whammy. There is a palpable relief that the majority of the states are reopening their economies, including 75% of California. Second, there is growing hope that a vaccine is coming our way sooner rather than later. And lastly, the third whammy is that the Fed chairman, Jay Powell, told investors over the weekend that the central bank's checkbook remains wide open, strongly hinting that more monetary policy stimulus is on its way. The economic collapse has taken a dangerous turn where now it is consumer prices that are being pulled down into an abyss as consumers sitting at home have postponed their purchases. The danger is that consumers will see that prices are falling and actually stop buying goods and services to wait for even cheaper prices and a better deal, which will only serve to prolong the recession and reinforce the economy's downward spiral into the unknown. That put investors in a selling frame of mind, with the Dow ending the week 2.6% lower. The S&P 500 fell 2.2%, and the Nasdaq shed 1.2% over the 5-day run. But Monday's good news saw investors leave safe havens for riskier ground. So tell me, what the hell? So this whammy, is that really good news that the Dow went up 900 points on this triple whammy?
I'm not. It's not. I mean, it's like it's a sugar high from a donut. It's as good as the feeling for the 20 minutes after you ate a donut.
Okay.
I mean, this is all hocus pocus. This is all baloney.
Okay.
I mean, you don't know who knows from the vaccines. The market is a frazzled drug addict looking for a hit one way or the other. It is really to be ignored. The reality is, because the stock market is the only thing that can drive real political action. And so when the stock market goes into those big, crushing free falls like it did in 08 and 09 and like it did in March of this year, that's the sort of thing that can create significant structural political change, which is why they've figured out that they just jam it with the Federal Reserve to put the narcotics in the system, give the stock market morphine. Everything else that's happening inside of the economic system is much less apparent, much less mentally, like there's no mental sharpness to it because it's so slow and dull, right, and dispersed. This small business, that small business. People don't like to talk about their financial problems because it's associated with shame.
Mm-hmm.
So there's all this sort of, whereas when the stock market just goes down 50%, it forces activity. It's unfortunate that they figured out how really to give it the narcotics that they do, because that allows them to cover up everything else. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about the triple whammy up down. It's nonsense. I mean, the stock market's out of its mind, in the sense that it's not a person on morphine is not a healthy, coherent person, and a stock market on trillions in Fed stimulus is not a healthy stock market. It has no association with the value. A stock market at its best, in principle, represents some estimation of the economic value of the enterprises and businesses and companies in an economy. Right? That's what it is. And the U.S. stock market doesn't reflect that. It reflects sort of a sentiment analysis of some of the businesses, although really there's only 4 or 5 businesses that control the entire stock market now. Because we've gone to this sort of hyper-consolidated monopoly architecture as a matter of policy in this country. But everybody knows that it's supported by Chairman Powell and his $10 trillion plan.
Okay.
Does that make any sense?
Yes. No, it's all making I get everything you're saying. You're doing a great job breaking it down. Everything's just overwhelming.
Ryan, trying to break it down. No, I know you're that's where you end up with. But again, it's sort of like, there's the crucible of all the pressure of all this horrid information. You're just like, oh my God, this is horrible. Ranked choice vote, just making every election, whether it's city election, state election, county election, presidential election, primary, et cetera, just ranked choice voting. Just ranked choice voting.
Ranked choice.
One thing. And again, imagine instead of going into the battle, you just dissolve the floor underneath them and they all fall through it. You eliminate the binary vote and you eliminate the entire basis of their monopoly.
Well, yes, that's exactly right, which is why it will never happen, which is what, and that it don't, yeah.
Well, they passed it in Maine. I mean, any state with a referendum can get it done. There's some 37 states. I mean, I don't mean to go all optimistic on you here, but it can be done. It has been done. It is being done. More should be done. You know, if I was the Wizard of Oz and could, you know, inspire any set of activity, I would strongly advocate these sort of super surge protests, this pulsing, recurring pulsing, and I would demand health care, and I would demand ranked choice voting, and I wouldn't stop the pulsing protests until those things happen.
Ranked choice voting. You think it's that powerful of a tool that it could actually change things?
Again, I'm not suggesting that just that one thing, the next day everything's going to be back to glory.
Right.
But I'm saying that, you know, it's as if it takes away a huge, huge factor in the entire power base of the two parties, because the two parties function on a political system that's entirely based on destroying your opponent. No one's running for anything. All the money, the $1 billion on this side, the $1 billion on that side, is spent to destroy your opponent. So it doesn't matter how much you hate Donald Trump.
Right.
You hated Hillary Clinton more.
Right.
It doesn't matter how much you hate Hillary Clinton. You hated Donald Trump more.
Right.
You think that people you think the Biden people are in love with Joe Biden? A senile, I mean, a man who's basically being abused by the people around him, as far as I can tell, to be forced into this situation, and as it is. But you think it's that people are like, listen, people hate Donald Trump more than they hate Joe Biden, and we can spend a lot of money making people hate Donald Trump more than they hate Joe Biden. But that entire dynamic of lesser of two evils voting, and the entire campaign apparatus, campaign industry, Oppo research, the entire industry is based on monetizing and advancing power through lesser of two evils and character assassination. It's what the American political system is. A ranked choice voting, and I'm sure you're going to have some viewers who will say, well, no, ranked choice voting, there's some, you know, the instant runoff, there's different sort of identifications and optimizations of this method. And so I don't want to get into the weeds of which one is the best version of this. But when you allow a prioritization of a selection of choices, you end up with forcing the candidates to run for things, because
yes,
you want to be, even if I'm not, if it's Jimmy, Dylan, and Steph running, and I want to get as many if I'm not going to be the number one, I want to get as many number two votes as possible. Mm-hmm. And the problem with the character assassination is the assassin, the person who's, you know, throwing the mud, finds themselves deeply unpopular for the character trait of being a mud thrower, which makes it really hard to get the number two position, even if you can't get the number one. Anyway, I'm going on and on.
No.
The ranked choice voting is appealing because it flips the incentive to run for things, as opposed to the incentive is simply the annihilation of the opponent.
So that would be really a huge sea change in our politics if people actually could run for something, and then people got to vote for something instead of voting against someone else, which is what the situation we've been in my entire life.
So that's why I bring up the concept and the reality of ranked choice voting. It's why, I mean, listen, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party in the state of Maine have never agreed on anything ever in the history of that state. For the first time in the history, so they managed to get ranked choice voting as a referendum. The referendum passed, so all the people of Maine said, we prefer to vote through ranked choice voting just because we're the people and this is a democracy. And so we've all sort of thought about this and debated this, and we would like to have more choices in our selection process and a more rational interpretation of our sentiment, which is what are you for, not who do you hate more, right?
Right.
The current voting thing is who do you hate more. And the Democrat and Republican Party, for the first time in the history of the state, got together to go to the Supreme Court to try to declare ranked choice voting unconstitutional. It was the first thing they ever agreed on.
Yep. That was amazing. And they didn't they get a court to actually overturn it or something? And then maybe
it's been going back and forth. They win, and then they It's going on for years.
Yeah.
But the point is, much better to create a referendum and get ranked choice voting on the ballot
Mm-hmm.
than to vote for Joe Biden and hope for the best, or vote for Donald Trump and hope for the best.
Right. Well, we have we have a referendum ballot acts initiatives here in California. Hey, I found out what this donut theory is. We're going to talk about it. We talk it on our next Corona Talk. But it seems pretty interesting. It says Amsterdam is trying to get ahead of the problem with a recovery plan it released in early April titled Amsterdam's Circular Strategy. It's a bit different from what one might expect from a post-pandemic recovery plan. Its main goals aren't about growing the economy or increasing the gross domestic product. Rather, it's about making the city better for people and the planet. What we are looking at is how we can become a healthy and resilient city again. We're going to look at how we are going to make sure that people actually have a job again. And the city's plan focuses on ensuring affordable housing and jobs, revamping recycling programs, and cutting food waste. Its overarching goals are to slash the use of raw materials in half by 2030 and phase them out completely by 2050. So that's just a tease of what we're going to cover next time on Corona Money Talk with Dylan Ratigan. And that seems like pretty interesting what they're doing. It seems like it might parallel with that new Michael Moore movie, The Planet Earth, where it talks about we need to reduce our consumption and that just transitioning from fossil fuels to renewables isn't going to do it, that we actually need to reduce our consumption. Something like what's happening right now during this coronavirus. I kind of jokingly said it's kind of funny that this virus is actually curing the worlds of climate change. But it won't do it for too long. So does that interest you to talk about that donut theory and what they're doing there next time?
There's a lot to be said on that, and I think that I don't necessarily agree with all of the conclusions, but I most assuredly agree with the premise, which is this is the single greatest opportunity the world will ever have for a fundamental shift in the basics of our infrastructure and resource system, how we use our cities, all the things that we can talk about, and sort of how to do that, which, some countries are going to seize that opportunity. I can assure you the United States will not.
Will not, because we have a media bought by the people who's interested in not having that conversation. I mean, I don't want to make
America has a policy against that.
Yeah, yes. Yes. Dylan, it's always...
No joke.
I know people don't understand that their government is actually their enemy working against them. They're not there to help make their problems better. They're there to, as you said, your car ran out of gas, we're going to come steal the tires and rip the radio out of it. That's what the government does to the United States. That's what they're doing right now. That's what Bernie Sanders and every progressive in Congress signed on to. And that's
remarkable.
And they gave away all their leverage. So now when they're going back to do this HEROES Act, they have absolutely no leverage, which I predicted, everybody knew they would have no leverage, and they did it anyway. And by the way, they didn't even stand up to Nancy Pelosi over this last HEROES Act. They all except Rashida Tlaib. I think she voted against, or Pramila Jayapal maybe. Only one of them voted against it. There was a bunch of centrists who voted against. It's just it's just not going to happen electorally. There's just not going to be a change that happens electorally. And if you think, I mean, when you get somebody, like I said before, what is the point of voting for people who don't take corporate money if they genuflect and do the bidding of the people who do anyway? And what they're doing it for, I have no idea. For committee assignments, because they don't want to become Ralph Nader, I have no idea what they get out of betraying their base. But they do it every day.
But again, I take issue, and I know we got to wrap this up, but I take issue with the identification of their base. I mean, if you look at even the most basic recent polling, more than 70% of Republicans and 80% of Democrats believe that UBI and healthcare is appropriate during the crisis. That's not your base.
Right. That's right.
Country.
That's the country. Yeah. Again, it's like we have a hostile foreign government occupying our country. But it's not.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Right. and at best we have the Vichy Democrats to fight against it, and they're not. Oh my God. Anyway, all right. Well, anything else?
Again, we talked about the pulse protesting.
Pulse protest.
Would be super effective, and then also I think we did ranked choice voting. I mean, I hate to have these conversations because it can be fairly. It's like doing some heavy shock therapy. So, especially depending on where you're at before you get into it, if you really listen. And so I hate to. I like that we can at least introduce some other thoughts that are constructive to the restructuring, that are not based on, chaos, violence, or self-immolation, which I think are all terrible choices. And so the pulse protesting and the ranked choice voting, I think, can be very effective on it.
So pulse protesting, if people don't know what you're referring to what they did in Hong Kong, where they were able to get 3 million people out into the streets at the drop of a hat in a city of 6 million people, and it's called pulse protesting, and it's more of a joyful event than it is out of anger, right? That's how you would describe it?
Obviously there's plenty. Let's not be delusional. There's Molotov cocktails. It got out of control. Right. You can't. There's so much anger. But yeah, there is. It is one. People don't have to live outside for months on end. They get to live in their home. Two, it creates an overwhelming presence that is impossible to deny. And again, if it comes with a specific request, i.e. healthcare or ranked choice voting, as opposed to chaotic hundreds of requests, we're protesting everything. It's the ambient undefined rage, which is both understandable but disastrously counterproductive. This is a bigger conversation because what they did is a 4-stage thing to build the network, which we can talk about another time. But yeah, it's not. And I would say that what they were doing in France was also pulse protesting every Saturday. So there's ways that it can be done, but it's that recurring surge. And then to the degree to which you have the ability to have the energy skew to sort of a surge of outrageous joy, right? Imagine a spontaneous Coachella,
right?
Again, I'm not an idiot, and I know that there's a lot of anger and justifiable anger, and any protest is going to have that component. It is unfortunately the least productive thing because you're dealing with, a police force that is looking for an opportunity to light the rockets. Mm-hmm. And so it is profoundly disarming to have a bunch of really happy people overwhelm systems and infrastructures in favor of healthcare and more voting choice. The way that protesters are marginalized is because they destroy the small businesses, and then nobody likes that. In Catalonia, they torched Barcelona last year, and however justified they were for the issues that are sort of projected against them from Madrid in this case, and Madrid is extremely abusive of Catalonia and Barcelona. It's a whole other political story, but it's also the same one as worldwide. But when you look at the response in Catalonia, which was super destructive, all of a sudden the very protesters they become pariahs in their own town, and it works in the favor of the oppressor, in this case Madrid. Whereas, with the Hong Kong protesters, there was a conscious effort to patronize small businesses that supported the protest.
Right.
There was a vigilance among the protesters around celebrating and preserving infrastructure, not destroying infrastructure. And so, anyway, I understand why the destruction happens. The level of abuse is profound, and it is a big ask for human beings to not respond to that level of abuse with something that is of a similar vibration. But that's why people like Nelson. That's why people like Nelson Mandela and Gandhi, is because they're able to transmute the rage of that abuse into something that has the power of Zeus, as opposed to just an out of control wildfire.
So
and
we're going
the
to
power of Zeus is absolute. It doesn't require rage. It just is.
So we're gonna actually be talking more about that the Pulse protests in Hong Kong. Hopefully, we're going to get one of the organizers on the show. We'll see. But that's something that has to happen here, and if it doesn't, it's going to it's again that we don't have any options. So we got to do something like that here. We're going to be talking more about it going forward. We're going to try to get people's consciousness raised about how this works and what it can do and how effective it was in Hong Kong. And it's also happening around the world, right? I mean, it's not just so we'll talk more about it, right?
No, I mean 20 cities, right? I mean, last year, if it wasn't for the coronavirus, the story coming into this year was this wave of pulse protesting. Beirut had their version of it. There's a bunch of huge ones in different African cities. I mentioned Barcelona. Paris obviously got a tremendous number of headlines. Hong Kong kind of took over set the world record for effectiveness. You're like, holy moly, these people, they got half the city out. That momentum and the sort of transition from the occupation model, which is we're against everything, right? Everybody make their list of the 50 things that they're against, and everybody can pick everything they're against.
Right.
And we're just going to pick a location, and we're going to stay there, and we're not leaving until they fix it, which is it's a chess position that I don't even have to fight you, because even if you live in this town square for a year, eventually you're going to leave. Okay? You just are. And so, or your numbers are going to be so small that, listen, if you want to go jam yourself in the face with a fork, I'm not going to stop you, but don't expect me to care. Whereas with the pulse method, people are able to stay home, sleep in their bed, eat food, pet their dog, kiss their wife, their husband, whatever, and still participate in an actually profoundly more impactful sense of peaceful social expression. I mean, Beirut, they were running full house. I mean, they were bringing sound system. I mean, it was a party, man.
And of course, this is all news to me. Of course, we didn't hear anything about this in the United States. I'm sure it was not covered.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was not. Because of the nature, as you know, I've been generally not in this country for the past couple of years, but came back for the. I left. As you know, I was in Milan, and then I went to Barcelona, and then from Barcelona came here, back to New York to protect myself from the risks of the coronavirus by coming back to by far the biggest global hotspot that exists.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So if I start raising consciousness about the Pulse protests here in the United States, how soon before the FBI puts kiddie porn on my thing and they say I'm running guns to terrorists?
I mean, I would imagine that's already in the works.
I would too.
Well, maybe we should stop talking about it. Maybe we've said enough, James.
I mean, that's what they do. That's exactly what they do. They'll do it. Okay. Well, this is exciting. So that's interesting. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the donut theory of economics that's happening in the Netherlands. Got a lot of great stuff to talk about next time we talk to Dylan Ratigan next Tuesday on Corona Money Talk. Are you excited?
You know who else? Tara McCormick was one of the big organizers for the ranked choice voting referendum in Maine.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there are people. There's expertise that you could bring onto this platform to help people, whether it's on pulse protesting or on ranked choice voting.
That's my plan. I've been bringing on union organizers and protest organizers, and we'll bring out someone who can explain ranked choice voting and their activism. And that's what I'm trying. I'm trying to do what I can from my garage. If we didn't have the coronavirus, I would also be putting on a yellow vest and going downtown somewhere or the federal building every Saturday to try to start something. But we have the coronavirus, so I can't do this. And this is all I can do. And we're doing it. And you have great...
You're doing a hell of a job. I mean, my only issue with the whole situation is that you're a goddamn comedian and you're supposed to be funny, and all this stuff is just really, messing up the funniness.
Yeah, but you got to have, you got to have that tragedy. It's tragedy plus time, right?
Okay.
So, boy, there's going to be some great comedy coming out of this shit. You can't wait. Oh, my God.
All right. Good. I was worried about
Yeah,
that.
my
That makes me go,
my Comedy Central special was a big deal, but they ain't going to be half as funny as the next one. I'll tell you that. Yeah, this is
I
good.
believe it. I believe it, sir.
Dylan Ratigan, check him out with Tom Sosnoff's Tasty Trade, Truth or Consequences podcast. Dylan, thanks again.
Skepticism. Truth or Consequences was a game show in like the 50s, I think.
Oh, that's right. I said Truth or Consequences. I meant Truth or Skepticism. Yeah, that was a game show. That's right.